You're listening to the Wedding Biz Network, the voice of the creative entrepreneur. Hey everyone, it's Andy Kushner, host of The Wedding Biz, in which I conduct in-depth and revealing interviews of icons and those who I feel are the next generation icons of the weddings and event industry. And this is all to provide you with education and inspiration. And hopefully this will help inspire you. I've got a list of top 10 tips for dealing with stress that I've taken from interviews with various past guests of the Wedding Biz podcast. To get those, just go to theweddingbiz.com/top tips. Again, theweddingbiz.com/top tips. And before I introduce today's special guest, I want to mention that the Wedding Biz podcast has really been my passion project for almost 4 years, and I've been so driven to support this industry and to help your growth in it by bringing you insights from our industry leaders. And so I really appreciate all the response that I have gotten. As the show has grown, so have opportunities to bring you this great content. However, these opportunities do come at a financial cost, and the best way for me to keep maximizing the potential of the show and to avoid charging a membership fee is to ask you to become a patron. If you value the show and its content, you can go to theweddingbiz.com and click on the patron link to sign up for as little as $6 a month or more if you feel so inclined. Not only will you be supporting the show, but you'll also be securing your access to solid, exclusive future content. So I appreciate that. So if you missed last week's episode on Monday, I had celebrity makeup artist and hairstylist Harold James out of Paris. Very popular, successful, really wonderful, heartfelt conversation. And then on Wednesday, for the next level, to talk about that episode, I had gown designer from Paris, Reem Arodaki, with me to talk about Harold. And now for today's guest, I'm so excited to say that it is Christina Matteucci, Executive Director of David Beahm Destination. Christina has been on the show in several episodes. I had her one-on-one in episode 188 to talk about collaborative relationships between what she terms as number ones and their number twos. And then I also had her on with David Beahm in episode 307. And so for today's conversation, we talk about how everything we do in business has some element of performance in it. And so how can we best understand and utilize this opportunity when we speak to clients, when we give presentations, and so much more. So enjoy this conversation with Christina Matteucci. So Christina, I saw you at Engage like a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, when you gave a talk about being what you called a number two to David Beahm. Mm-hmm. And you were amazing, so engaging, got a standing ovation, all of that.
Thank you, Andy.
Yeah. So, in a sense, when I think about that, whenever we open our mouths in a business situation, there's an element of performance involved. You agree?
110%. Authentic performance.
Well, authentic.
I want to be clear when we look at performance in terms of sales and engagement with the client, it is important to always function from a place of authenticity, always function from a place of truth, because more than anything, a client can read right through that. So real performance, true, authentic performance.
Yeah.
Yes, 100%.
No, I agree. So the context in which we're going to talk about this is, and tell me if you disagree, but to powerfully engage a listener, to really engage them, a listener, an audience, whatever it is, so that, they get what we're saying, that whatever point we're trying to make, whatever we're trying to do is taken in. So in that sense, there's this element of performing. And so I thought we would talk about various aspects of it. Mm-hmm. Like, one of them is, it's known that you want to create imagery, and
of course,
right? And I was thinking, I used to be a songwriter, and I'll never forget that when these big, huge hit writers would talk about it, they talked about like putting furniture in the room, in a sense, like mm-hmm. having these little points so that the audience can have their own interpretation, but be able to see and make it even more connecting for them, right?
Yep.
So it seems that that's a real important element to bring into it is imagery. Do you think of that when you're preparing, however you're going to talk to a client or for a speech? Do you think like that?
Oh, 100%. Imagery is so important. And the easiest way to elicit that sort of mental image is through storytelling. And I think that storytelling is one of the most powerful tools we have in our arsenal to be able to connect with our clients in a real, meaningful way. I mean, storytelling as an Italian is sort of in my genes. I mean, I remember sitting around the kitchen table and hearing my family tell stories.
Yeah.
And I remember the feeling, I actually remember it very, very keenly, of when I was finally old enough and able to like cobble together my own story,
right,
and telling a compelling story at my kitchen table, and the power that I felt with that. And from that point on, for me, I've been addicted to owning that my whole life. So it's owning that room and owning the space and creating imagery through storytelling is something I love, but it is something that is inherent to us as human beings. I mean, before the written word, we sat around the fire and told stories.
That's right.
That's how we passed down our history. That's how we created storytelling, really, in its current form. And so, to that degree, I think we are all capable of this, and it's just how much you choose to employ it. And there's definitely a strategy to storytelling. There's a technique to storytelling. My coaches are masters at storytelling. So I've actually trained in this. My coach, Kimberly Weil at storytellingschool.com, she is incredible and has a whole technique for storytelling, which I think is incredible because what it does is it heightens the stakes, right? And it creates connectivity and it creates interaction between the two people.
It's almost, to me, like hypnotic in a way. You're putting the listener into this zone. What are, I mean, obviously it's a whole nother episode to talk about all the techniques, but just an example, what are some of the key techniques that you recall?
Oh, absolutely. Well, I think the most important thing is to have a sense of surprise in it. I mean, you never want to sort of tip your hand when you're storytelling. You want to have that turn. If it will be like a pivot,
like put me on the edge of my seat kind of thing.
Exactly. That sort of sense of, I don't want to say urgency, but like, what's going to happen next?
Yeah.
And so that's a real skill that you can use, but also creating a setting, really, really allowing, and that's where the imagery comes into place, right? So the small details. So if you're talking about, I was writing for one of my upcoming talks, I was writing about my grandfather, and I said, I flopped on the avocado shag rug. Now, we all have
immediately.
You know where that is,
and I also get an emotional feeling. Like when you said that, immediately I saw. But for me, I went back to the 1970s.
That's exactly when it was.
Oh, okay.
So late 70s, flopping on the avocado shag rug,
right,
and listening to Grandpa Vincent tell me a story. And so it's those sort of little key things that it opens up people's hearts in a way that I don't think just sitting down and giving a sales pitch does, right? It's being able to bring in those moments of humanity and moments of shared connectivity, no matter who. Everybody knows the avocado shag rug.
Right.
You knew it immediately.
Yeah, well, and I'm also thinking too that, obviously professional speakers talk about doing it when they're speaking to audience, but even when we're talking to a client, it's interesting, Christina, a long time ago, with my music company, I would say, this is why we're so great. The greatest singers, greatest musicians, really know how to work the crowd. It's all words. And then I started to realize that, let me paint a picture. It's like, like saying to the client, here's how we want to start. When the doors open and people see, and then I start describing this beautiful decor that you have and the colors and the smells, and everyone is really wowed. And then they see on this stage, this whole 4 singers out front, and they're dancing and they're moving. But it's like creating this whole picture that they can see, so they really get it, as opposed to just the words.
Exactly. And I think one of Kimberly, my coach's big tenets, is start with the story.
Start right off the bat.
Start with a story.
I like that. Just to grab them immediately, right?
Exactly. And it just diffuses the pressure of the situation. Even if it's just, you're getting into a meeting. Oh my God, you guys, let me tell you what happened on the way over here.
So not even related to the subject of...
Exactly.
Yeah.
Oh my God, let me tell you what happened on the subway on the way over here.
Right.
You're not going to believe this.
Right. And look, we're just talking on the microphones and right now I'm engaged. I know you're giving an example and that gets me immediately.
Yeah, exactly. And so start with the story because that is the quickest way to take down walls and build trust.
Yeah, well, and yes, and connection immediately.
Exactly.
Human kind of a connection. Yeah, it's interesting how, as we're talking about, it applies everywhere, right? Every time we open our mouths. I mean, I do want to, while we're talking about this, I want to talk about talking to clients. I also want to talk a little bit about speaking too. So as far as the clients, what are some of the key, like you're talking about telling a story? Again, like you say, I think there's a fine line between it being a performance, quote unquote, and like you say, being sincere and authentic. But in a sense, I always feel like I'm kind of on stage when I'm in front of a client.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Do you feel that too?
Totally. What you're talking about there is the difference between authenticity and performative, I think, is where you don't, you want it to be wholly true to you. And yet you want to be prepared when you walk into the space. And any good performer, unless they are an improv artist, which I even have to say, even improv artists practice.
Right.
There's a certain amount of preparation that goes into performing. And should be a certain amount of preparation that goes into selling because it is, to some degree, a performance.
How do you prepare? And is there a difference? To me, I'll speak for myself. There is a bit of a difference. It's kind of subtle between getting ready for a client meeting in person and getting up on stage and speaking to a crowd. But there is almost this physical, like when I work out an exercise, I had a trainer who used to say, you first want to just do some cardio, just warm up the body.
Yeah.
I mean, so what do you do to prepare?
Well, I think there's the preparation that happens in the days leading up to a big pitch, if you will, or a big sale or a big talk. And then I think there's the preparation that happens in the immediate hours and minutes leading up to that, right?
Okay,
so in the days before, another tenet that my coaches have instilled in me is prepare, don't plan, which I love, right? So you get all your ducks in a row. You get your talking points in order. If you're working in a team, if it's a group sales pitch, you talk about who's handling what components of this meeting so that your clients feel like they're on the ride with you. Yeah. And there's never a sense of like, somebody doesn't know what's going on. No, we have a plan.
Well, it's a strategy.
And to some degree, it's a loose script so that you feel guided throughout the process. Clients don't want to be handheld, but they do want to feel like they're being directed.
Yeah.
Right? So in terms of preparation leading up to something like that, obviously if it's a sales pitch, that's getting talking points in order, making sure I have all of my components together. If I'm getting ready for a talk, I mean, that's hours of memorization, hours of rehearsal.
Yeah, I don't know how you do it.
I don't take any speaking appearance for granted.
Yeah.
It's a lot of reworking and especially because I really do never give a talk twice. I'm going to recraft. I might use different elements of a talk twice.
Yeah.
But I'm going to recraft for the audience. And I think that's an important part of preparation is understanding who your client is, understanding that your performance, if you will, may be different for a 25-year-old couple versus
the parents
versus a 65-year-old mother of the bride.
Yeah.
Those are two different performances. Those are two different dialogues. Those are two different talking points. Really understanding who's going to be present, that goes a very, very long way. In terms of, again, going back to when I prepared to take the stage, a ton of rehearsal. And that actually includes choreography. So when I'm looking at preparing to speak on stage, and I don't think a lot of people think of this when they're preparing to do a speech, but I actually think about, okay, how much stage space do I have?
Right.
How much of this space can I use? When I did my TED Talk, I was limited to 5 feet.
Yeah.
A 5-foot circle, which
that's tough.
I'm going to tell you, Andy, I had no idea how tough it was.
Oh, really? You didn't practice ahead of time in a 5-foot?
I didn't think I had to until my coaches laid a 6-foot red rug on the ground and said, get into it and start. And then I didn't know what to do. It was like I had bricks attached to my feet, because in speaking and performance and in giving talks, there are some fun little tricks that I think are really great. The first is that when you step forward, you are conveying something of import to the audience.
Oh, literally, like taking a step forward toward them.
Like,
that's right.
Listen to what I'm saying.
Lean in. Yeah.
Lean in. I have something really important to say. When you take a step back, you might be coming off of a point.
A little more generic. Right.
Exactly. You might be backing down from something.
I think I do it automatically, but I didn't think about that.
Right. So the other thing is, if you have a list of something that you want to convey to a group of people, when we read left to right.
Right.
So when I give a talk and I'm saying 3 things in a list, I will address the audience right to left because they're reading it left to right.
Interesting.
And in that way, the psychology of that, my audience actually follows better.
It's subtle, but they do. Yeah.
And these are just little, and you can use that in a room. Let's say you're sitting in a sales meeting and you want to talk about 3 things. You can do that in a circle around the room. You can use that same technique. And they're really, really powerful tools. You know, when you're in the meeting, I think one of the most important things is listening to hear, not listening to respond.
Listening to hear?
Not listening to respond. I think so often when we have prepared, and this is why I bring this up during this question about preparation, when we prepare, sometimes we overscript. And so then we're not listening to hear.
Right, we're just trying to get to the next thing.
We're listening to respond.
Yeah.
Or listening to get to the next point. And even in acting school, are you listening? Are you listening to the other person? I can't tell you how many times at NYU's Tisch School of the Arts I heard, but are you listening? Did you hear what your fellow partner in this acting scene said or sang? Are you listening? And that's so important to really making the people in the room feel that they're part of this performance with you.
But it's complicated because you have this list of bullet points and talking points that you want to make, yet at the same time, we've got to be so flexible. And who knows, in the middle of a point we're trying to make, even a story, they may cut in and say something, and we need to listen and address that.
And that's where prepare, don't plan comes in so well. So well. And in terms of other preparation, I think it's really important to use if you have a team, to use your team well. What roles is everybody playing in that group? Oftentimes in this office, we are meeting en masse with our clients. So it's David, it's Ryan, our creative director. It's myself or one of my fellow sales team members. Yeah. Or we might even have sometimes a member of our production team there to explain how something's going to work. Well, what are the roles each person is going to play during that meeting? Who's the bad cop that's going to talk about money? Who's the person that's going to talk about logistics? Who's the person that's going to be the dreamer, the romantic, the one to sell the vision?
Yeah.
All of those roles have a really important place in the play that you're putting on.
Oh, I love how you're saying that. See, now that right there helped me put it into a better context.
Yeah.
I get it totally. And you got to discuss it together ahead of time.
Exactly.
Totally talk about it.
And it works because then the client is clear. It's just like what I was saying before. They don't want to be handheld, but they want to be guided.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I know that Christina's going to be dealing with the money. So let me ask this question to Christina, right? Or David's going to be dealing with the vision. Let me ask this question of David, right? They get it. It's a gift to be able to give our clients those sort of roles because then everything becomes clear and they understand the import of every single member of our team. The other thing that I think is really important when you're working in a team is to use them to help you be a better performer. So with the example of, let's say, a verbal tick, to say, you say this a lot when you get nervous, like in a loving way.
Yeah.
I mean, I once was at a speaking engagement where someone, I swear, Andy, after every 2 to 3 sentences, they would say,
Mm.
And that was how it was on the ship, And after we got off the boat, I wanted somebody to say, darling, you have a verbal tick. This is what you do when you get nervous.
It's hard to say something to someone, but I want to know. I want to know.
You want to know because a lot of times you don't even recognize it in yourself, because verbal tics, they are 100% based out of nerves. And you don't want that feeling of nervousness in a sales pitch. You want people to feel like they're in good hands. And if you have somebody who has a verbal tic, that may create a sense of confusion in the room. Like, what's happening? What's happening here? It's I support being supportive of each other in that space. Like, hey, you've got that. You might want to watch that. Like, you've got that verbal tic. Or I'm trying to think of another example where teamwork in that regard is so important. How are you helping other people in your group to best shine? I think that's another really important factor of a cast. If you think about a sales team as a cast, if during a client consultation, if a question comes up that I know I'm not the best person to answer, I'm going to punt it to the person I know is going to land the answer to that question. So how also are you fostering the best performance out of the people in your group too?
And it really takes practice.
It does.
I want to be sure you know the wonderful news of our latest show, Stop and Smell the Roses, with acclaimed lifestyle and event design expert Preston Bailey. Not only will he share the secrets, tools, and technologies behind his extraordinary ability to create a theatrical environment out of any space, you will also discover more about the man behind the magic. Preston will reveal how his focus on personal growth has been the root of his professional success, and you'll have the opportunity for him to answer your questions along the way. Plus, Preston will be inviting onto the show many of the star celebrities he has worked with in the past, so you don't want to miss a single episode. We also have another great show on the Wedding Biz Network, The Business of Being Creative, with host Sean Lowe. Since debuting last May, his show has really taken off, and he's continuing to bring you the creative business advice he's shared with accomplished industry notables. Be sure to take advantage of Sean's talkback opportunity by recording questions and comments from right there in each episode's show notes. So, if you are a creative who is turning your craft into a business or want to take it to another level, head to theweddingbiznetwork.com and take a listen to Stop and Smell the Roses with Preston Bailey and The Business of Being Creative with Sean Lowe. That's theweddingbiznetwork.com. It's interesting, Christina, I got this business partner for the music business about a year and a half ago, and we're both really good at what we do, and we complement each other. We do things differently too. And it did take some time. We would go meet with, for us, it was mostly meeting with planners, and destination planners and stuff like that. And it didn't take too long, but we did have to kind of figure this out, like in terms of how and when to punt it to the other person, how to support the other person. It got to the point where we had a chemistry as a team, the two of us, and we're just killing left and right, as a team. And it took some time to figure that out.
And when you feel it,
it's hot. Afterward, this is interesting. After these meetings, it felt like the same. I had the same feeling as after a performance.
100%. 100%.
It would be fun just for a moment to go back for a moment to me is even how you enter the room. Like I'll never forget how I learned this. For some people, it is intentional. Some people don't think about it. Maybe they do it in a certain way. But I actually worked for IBM for a while, and I was in this extensive sales training school, and they brought in a Broadway director. IBM could do that in those days. Bring in a Broadway director to talk to us new trainees. We were all like 21, 22 years old. And I'll never forget, I was expecting, like what we're getting into right now immediately.
Right.
He started with how you enter a room. And the first thing he did was have each of us leave the room and one at a time walk into the room. And we didn't know what the hell he's talking about. So, the first person walks in and he says, no, do it again. And they walk in, and he said, think of yourself as a light bulb. You're 1,000 watts. Person walks in and there was more. And then he said, no, go back 10,000 watts. And then we started to get it. And then each of us would just practice walking into the room with this look in our eyes and this vibe and this feeling. Like right now, I'm kind of turning it on and I can feel it, So it even starts right there. Like I remember when you walked into for the Engage conference, they had, instead of coming from behind the stage, I remember you, I believe, walked up the aisle.
I surely did.
And boy, did you walk up the aisle. It was like a runway. I mean,
yes, I did.
Right. And I remember, and because I know about this stuff, I remember watching you walk and saying, holy shit, this is going to be something, because it was just all over you, the way you walked in.
Yeah.
With confidence and it was, what I'm talking about.
Yeah. So for me, I mean, that's the most fun. It's just the most fun. So leading up to a talk like that, I have a very intense song mix. So what you don't know is that during the talk,
are you listening? Yeah.
During the, I am full on Michael Phelpsing.
I love this.
I am full on Michael Phelpsing prior to getting onto the stage. And what I will do is I have a talking song list. I have a speaking song list. And it's a hype. It's just all hype, like get it kind of music.
Yeah.
And I sat in the back of that room and I watched the clock tick down for me. And when it got to 2 minutes before I was going to take the stage, I took my earbuds off and I set them aside. And I was on that high.
That's great.
And that lead up for me feels exactly like a roller coaster, like that tick, 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 tick. And you get to the apex of the roller coaster.
Yeah.
And when you get to walk down that aisle, you have crested and you're going.
Right.
And that's the energy that I bring into the space when I speak. You can have that same energy when you pick up the phone. I mean, one of the things one of my favorite David Beahm isms, if I can tell one of his stories, is from Mary Kay Cosmetics when he was working as a Mary Kay Cosmetics salesman. I don't remember this. Yes. So they train you that everybody has a sign around their neck saying, make me feel important, which I love. I love that metaphor. But that goes down to how you answer the phone. So let's say you get a phone call on a Sunday at 6:00 when you're making dinner and you don't know who it is. And maybe it's a new client. Instead of being like, hi, because it's Sunday.
Right.
Hi, because it's Sunday at 6:00.
Yeah.
Hi, this is Christina for David Beahm. And that's a different intention.
It puts me as a listener in a totally different place.
And I'm going to tell you something. I got a phone call about 2 weekends ago on a Sunday at 6:00.
Yeah.
And I answered, hi, this is Christina for David Beahm. And it was a groom on the other line. And he said, you're transferring your calls on the weekend to your cell phone and you answered like that? Oh my God, you guys really run a tight ship.
I love that.
It matters. It matters how you enter the room. Whether you are answering the phone, showing up in life, taking the stage, or getting on a Zoom, how you enter the room matters.
Let's talk about Zoom.
Sure.
That is such a challenge. I mean, one thing COVID has taught us is that all these in-person meetings are not as crucial as we thought. Now, I want to argue that I still way prefer to be in person, but this is how it's gone, right? And so we still have to perform to a certain degree in a virtual space, right? It's so much more challenging with Zoom to engage people on that. Do you have any tips, ideas about how to deal with that? I mean, you've been doing a ton of them too.
Absolutely. So one of my fellow speakers in my community, his name is Garrett Blair, and he is working on a technique called live virtual communication. And we're actually developing a a virtual retreat together to talk about collaboration in the virtual environment.
Ooh, I like this.
How do you work as a group in a virtual environment when you can't kick somebody under the table? What do you do then? How do you sort of those same teamwork elements I was just speaking about in person? How do you implement those in a Zoom scenario? But I think the most important thing when we talk about Zoom is it's a room and you need to understand that it's a room. So what does your background look like? What is your lighting? How is your audio? Have you practiced around with the platform that you're using?
Oh gosh, not at all.
Are you going to bumble with a new prospective client while you figure out the technology? It requires preparation and thought, and those things matter. And I think the other thing to think about, and everybody jokes around with it, but what do you wear? I mean, truly think of it like a TV show. What do you have on? I mean, sure, you may have sweatpants on, but like,
right.
What have you done your
we
hair?
all do.
Have you done your hair? Have you done your makeup? Did you put on a nice blouse? Did you make the other person feel important?
Do you know what? This is so interesting. You're saying this. Oh boy, I'm feeling guilty, but I'm going to be totally there with it.
No, hit me, because I have done many a call in sweatpants.
Well, but they don't see that. But the thing is, in the very beginning of this, when we switched over to Zoom, I would dress up. I would have a nice dress shirt on. And yes, I'd have sweatpants on and, like slippers or barefoot or something like that. But I would have a dress shirt on. As time went on, this is interesting. I noticed most people started to get more and more and more casual. Mm-hmm. I started to get more casual. Now I'm realizing, even right now, talking to you, I don't care how casual they are. If I want to make an impact, I'm going to go back to putting on that dress shirt again.
You're damn right.
You know?
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think the other thing that is so important, if you have a camera on, you have a camera on. Don't eat. Don't be distracted. Don't be looking off. The camera is on you.
Here's a tough thing, Christina, about that though. And I heard I heard it was, I think, a neurologist. I read this whole interesting article about how really hard it is to do this on Zoom, because as you know, the camera is at the very top of the screen.
Sure.
Or you have an attachment that's even higher,
Absolutely.
Another inch up. And yet to look at the person, you're kind of looking down. You can't really, they're not really seeing you look right at them. Matter of fact, I've gotten to the point where I pull my laptop further away from me so that I can look at them on the screen, but they think I'm looking at them because it's more at a distance. You know what I'm saying? Like I do that on purpose.
Well, there are tricks, right? So what you're saying is 100% true. I'm more talking about when I'm obviously looking at my cell phone during a Zoom. Like that befuddles me. I'm like, I'm here. I see you. Right. Looking at your phone, not listening to what I'm saying. I see you eating your lunch. I see you having a conversation with somebody else. I think my point here is like, if your camera's on, act like you're on. Act like you're on.
Yeah.
And the other thing with that tricky camera point that you just made, a lot of people, myself included, and I'm sure you need talking points. We do. Like that's just the nature of the game, right?
Sure.
There is a way. Two things I want to talk about this. One is that you want to try as much as possible to not make it feel like you're reading something.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
So one of the ways that you do that is you can use a tool. There are online tools called like prompters that you can put right underneath your camera.
Huh.
And so you like a teleprompter. And so you can have that running script going.
But is it covering the face of the person you're talking to, though?
No, you can actually run it. Like you can manipulate the window. I use Q prompter when I'm doing it. If I'm not memorized or I feel like it's going to be obvious for me to have talking points. But the other thing is, if you have a script, if you are working from talking points, I never necessarily recommend a script. I recommend talking points because I think you can be more extemporaneous with talking points and use colloquialisms and not feel as scripted, if you will. But I think one of my favorite exercises when I was in musical theater was that when I was training to be on Broadway, one of the exercises was they would give you a song like from Rodgers and Hammerstein, like I'm just a girl who can't say no, right? Like, but you had to do it as a monologue. You couldn't do it as a song.
Interesting.
And what that did, because when you read from a script, you sound scripted. You sound like you're reading. And what this exercise does with the song is it breaks you out of the song patterning so that your intention was different when you were singing because you weren't just necessarily following the song pattern.
Yes, the melody.
Correct. You were following the intention of the words, right?
I like that. Yeah.
And so when I work coaching people for speaking engagements or for something like this, I actually have them do that exercise. Like, let's take a song that even row your boat. Row your boat.
Right. Or is it row your boat?
Row your boat.
Or your boat.
Row your boat.
See, it's totally different.
Down the stream.
Yeah.
Merrily. I'm being ridiculous, but do you know?
No, but I get the point.
And that same exact tool can be used with scripts. Start breaking it up. Start mixing up your intent. What are you really trying to say? What is your intention? The other thing that I love, and I think with Zoom is really, really helpful, it's hard to feel a sense of urgency when you're on Zoom, right?
That's a good point. Yeah.
Because you're so detached, right? It's hard to feel the stakes are somehow lowered when you're on Zoom versus
That's true.
when you're in person, if you will. So again, when I was at NYU and I was studying accents and dialects, I had this amazing accents and dialects coach by the name of Casey Ligon. And she said that whenever you were working in an accent or a dialect, you should have one sentence that would drop you into the accent. So if I'm trying to do a New York cabbie and I'm going to be here and talk to you about being in New York,
you're very good at that. Yes.
My name's Stanley.
Uh-huh.
And I drive a cab.
And you have a whole visual thing that changes too.
Right. I have a sentence that drops me into that character. I think when we're talking about Zoom, what's interesting is you can have a sentence that drops you into the emotion. You can have a sentence that you feel powerful about in your pitch. You can have a sentence that you feel is compelling, that is the point you want to make. And using that in your head before you start the Zoom engagement, if you will,
right,
drops you into that sense of urgency. And all of a sudden the stakes feel higher. So I love that. And I love that for Zoom. And the other thing that I think people are genuinely uncomfortable with, especially in Zoom, but even in real life, is the pause.
Oh, very good point. Yeah, it gets very uncomfortable very quickly.
But a pause can also be your best sales technique.
Yeah.
Like, let it land.
Yeah, right.
Like that would be something you'd hear in an acting class. Let it land. Like, give it air.
Yeah, especially on Zoom. That's right. I feel compelled to keep going.
The dialogue.
Yeah,
but what if you just gave people space to take it in and go and think on it? Yes, you don't want to have an uncomfortable silence. Yes, that's not the ideal. But there is also nothing wrong with letting a point land.
Right.
And it can be incredibly powerful.
Yeah, I like that. Before we wrap up, is there anything else that you would like to express about this topic?
I think what I want to say about it is that there are techniques that help the person doesn't genetically have this, isn't predisposed to this.
Right. And most people are not.
Yeah. But there are techniques that you can use. I hate improv. I hate it.
I'm surprised.
I hate it.
Huh.
But my coaches make me do it.
Yeah.
Because it betters me.
Yeah.
It betters me for speaking. It betters me for pitches. It betters me for everything. If you're uncomfortable with this stuff, lean in. Seek out someone like me. Seek out someone like my coaches. Seek out someone like Garrett. Seek out Storytelling School or Garrett Blair. These are the kind of people who can help you get over whatever fear it is you have. And those fears are legit. There's not all of us are predisposed to wanting to own the room.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess you would ask me to think about what my favorite performance story was prior to this.
Right.
And my favorite performance story was when I was in preschool.
Oh, okay. We're going back.
We're going way back.
Yeah.
And I was 4 years old. And Mrs. Moore's preschool would have a spring pageant every year. And we'd read nursery rhymes. Mm-hmm. And I was Old MacDonald's wife. So I was dressed as a farm girl.
Okay.
And all of the other kids would get up and they would quietly read their poem.
Right.
And 3 little piggies went to market. You know, it was this very quiet, if they even were brave enough to get up at all.
Right.
I got up there bold as anything, walked right up to the microphone, did Old MacDonald, sat down, and then proceeded to mouth the words of everybody else's script.
Oh my God.
And I just think there's some of us that are born with this talent, and love it,
or wanting,
and enjoy it,
exactly.
and enjoy it. And for other people who don't, prepare, don't plan.
Yeah,
do the work. It's possible. We're not talking about rocket science. We're not decoding missile codes. We're not. This isn't brain surgery. There are real, tangible skills that are usable.
There are.
To help people for whom this is not their natural, they don't enjoy it.
You know what works for me the most, Christina, is whether I'm with a client or I'm getting ready to give a talk, but especially when I'm with a client, is first just basically shoot the shit. But not totally, off the wall. And I mean, there's still some thought to it, but I will key in on something to just simply break that ice, which for me not only breaks the ice for them, and puts them in a better position to take in what I'm going to say, but it breaks the ice for me.
100%.
Yeah.
Whatever, everybody has, in theater, everyone, I believe, has a pre-performance ritual to get them comfortable. For me, it's the song list, right?
Right.
I have my ritual.
Yeah.
There's something to be said for that. And to be able to honor that ritual and to get yourself in such a headspace where you are showing up. Because I think at the end of the day, you can take all the you take all the techniques, but you have to trust in them and to some degree throw them away once you're in the space.
Yeah.
And the best way you can do that is to show up as the best possible iteration of yourself. Mm-hmm. So hydrated, well slept, well rested.
Right.
And
dress so that you feel powerful.
Dress so that you feel powerful. Mm-hmm. And, if I'm having a speaking engagement, you won't find me at a cocktail party the night before because
seriously.
I'm in my hotel room ordering room service with a giant bottle of water.
Right. And get some good sleep.
Get some good sleep so I can be on the next day. Mm-hmm. And I think that, we are, as party people, we are programmed to go out and do the networking events. But if that networking event or that cocktail party is the night before something big, maybe you pass. Maybe you pass on that one for self-care so that you show up as the best version of yourself. Because there are no swings. There are no understudies for you in a sales pitch.
Right. Well, that's a good way to... Well, Christina, this has been a blast. I mean, obviously, we could go into so much more depth, but I think this was a great synopsis, summary of some of the key points. This was great having you.
I'm so glad.
Yeah.
I hope that your listeners are able to take some nuggets of wisdom from this today.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you for doing this.
My pleasure, Andy. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to my conversation with Christina Matteucci. Be sure to check out the website of David Beahm Destinations, which is davidbeahm.com. And also, you can check out Christina's TEDx talk, which is going to be in the show notes at theweddingbiz.com. Let me also give you her Instagram handle, and it is Tucci Mama. That's TEUCCIMAMA. And then in the show notes, again, you can get a link to the TEDx talk and also to her LinkedIn. And that's, again, at theweddingbiz.com. And if you can think of 3 really good friends who you think would benefit from listening to this wonderful conversation with Christina, please share it with them. And also give it a top review where you get your podcast from, because that helps others find the show. And for this Wednesday, I have an episode with Renee Dallow to talk about marketing your business on Clubhouse. So we'll catch you next week on The Wedding Biz.